So I currently serve in a leadership role with the World Council of Churches, which is an international ecumenical organization made up of more than 500 million Christians in 110 countries, and we're an ICANN partner. And part of what we did was frame nuclear weapons as not just a moral issue, but also a religious one. From the perspective of Christianity, we argued that nuclear weapons don't just represent a really bad idea, a really dangerous threat, but that they violate our core identities as people of faith, that it is a sin to use or threaten to use or possess nuclear weapons. And there was a critical interfaith component to our work. By working with Buddhists and Muslims and Jews and Hindus, we were able to come together to draft joint documents that said, whatever your faith tradition, nuclear weapons violate the fundamental tenets of what we believe. If our holy texts say we need to love our neighbor, that we are obligated to engage in the repair of the world, that there is something fundamentally sacred about human dignity, then we cannot support any notion of security that is based on nuclear deterrence. We need to live out our faith by openly and rigorously opposing nuclear weapons, and we need to make a common stand on this issue, despite the way we might be divided theologically or even politically on other issues. Last November, I was involved in a conference at the Vatican in which Pope Francis historically declared that not only the use, but also the possession of nuclear weapons violated the Christian faith, and the Catholic faith specifically. It's time for all the world's religions to do the same. We know that stigmatization works. States that possess nuclear weapons get very angry and nervous when any new country talks about developing them, which is strange because if they think that nuclear weapons are so fantastic and so safe, then why shouldn't everyone have one? But the very simple point that we are making in ICANN is that there are no right hands for nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons don't care who own them. They don't distinguish between civilians and soldiers, and there is not a difference between a nuclear weapon owned by France and one owned by Pakistan. If nuclear weapons are too dangerous to be owned by North Korea, they are just as dangerous when they're owned by the United States. As people of faith, we have to believe that we are in the world to change the world. And we need to move beyond the comfortable slogans that fit on a bumper sticker and engage in the complexity. The process of nuclear disarmament can't be left to politicians and diplomats. One of the most exciting parts about this process is the way that ordinary people, like us and like you, have been able to meaningfully participate. Diplomatic processes which have been dominated by men, largely white men from a handful of countries, was suddenly invaded by all the rest of us, women and indigenous people and queer people and religious people. Women had a leading role in the nuclear ban, from the leadership of ICANN, which is largely female, to many of the delegations of diplomats. The majority of countries and people who led the campaign are from the global south, demonstrating a dissatisfaction and outright rejection of a racist colonial world in which a handful of countries threaten the entire planet with destruction. For many of you in the room, your generation created nuclear weapons. It was the legacy that I was born into. But it is incumbent upon all of us to get rid of them forever. Nuclear weapons are not inevitable. Like any oppressive social construction, they were created by humans, and they can be dismantled by the same fierce love and determination that this is not the world we are meant to live in. The same scientific competence that invented nuclear weapons can be used to dismantle them. The billions of dollars that are currently spent on modernizing and maintaining our nuclear arsenals can be spent on alleviating poverty and investing in green technology. It is my belief in the inherent goodness of human beings that keeps me hopeful, even in spite of the terrifying reality of these weapons. But it's not enough just to believe that people are good. It's not enough just to talk about cooperation and cosmic oneness. It's not enough just to focus on inner peace. The world requires your action. We have to believe that change is possible, but that means challenging some of the powers that be. Changing the world is not for the conflict avoidant. Sometimes it requires that you engage in conflict. It requires you to be willing to disagree. We refuse to learn to just trust people that are smarter and more powerful than us, that they will take care of everything, and we refuse to be patient on this issue. One of the most annoying things that I was told by one diplomat was that it was nice that I was so passionate, but that I needed to understand that this was complicated and that a slow, step-by-step process was the only way forward. And to that, I simply say, no. No. I will not live under the constant threat of the annihilation of everything that I love and simply hope for the best. No, I will not accept that a bunch of white men in a secret office somewhere are responsible enough to take care of resolving the world's most intractable conflicts, while armed with thousands of weapons, powerful enough to destroy the world several times over. No. And I don't need a degree in nuclear physics or international relations to stand with millions of other people and say no, and neither do you. So what then can we do? The first thing we need to do is speak out as people of faith. Make a public declaration that you and your faith community reject nuclear deterrence as a false ideology that violates what you hold most dear. And then follow that up with action. Contact your elected officials in whatever country you live in and demand that they join the treaty. Look at where your personal money is invested and push your financial institution to divest from nuclear weapons and move your money if they don't. Encourage your religious institutions to implement ethical investment policies that don't support nuclear weapons. Show up for anti-nuclear protests and engage in direct action. Two of my dearest friends, Sister Ardith Platy and Sister Carol Gilbert, profound and fierce Dominican nuns, have spent the last 40 years of their lives working against nuclear weapons and have spent many years in prison as the result of their actions. Join them and people like them. Publicly support brave people of faith who are taking a stand with their own bodies to raise an alarm about the danger of nuclear weapons, including the Kings Bay Plowshares group, whose trial begins tomorrow morning in the United States. Working with ICANN, we refuse to accept the patronizing scolding of diplomats, particularly US and Canadian officials, who told us it was nice that we cared, but what we were suggesting was impossible. Nothing is changed by throwing up our hands and claiming the task in front of us is impossible. We don't always win. We don't always have the moments where it all feels worth it. We don't always win the Nobel Peace Prize. But we always have the option to love one another fiercely. We always have the obligation to struggle for each other. There's an incredible piece of musical theater called Hadestown that I sometimes turn to when I feel lost or overwhelmed. It's the reimagining of the myth of Hades and Persephone, of Orpheus and Eurydice, and it's a tribute to the power of trying. So the words we leave you with this morning are this: may the world we dream about
be the world we live in now. Thank you.